If you constantly feel like your social battery is permanently drained, it might not just be introversion. It might be the sheer, invisible exhaustion of playing a character to survive. You walk into the office or log into a virtual meeting, and before anyone speaks, your entire personality shifts. Your voice jumps half an octave. You laugh at a joke you do not find funny. You nod along to opinions you entirely disagree with, subtly adjusting your posture to match the person across the table. You filter every single syllable through a mental checkpoint before it leaves your mouth. By 5 o'clock, you aren't just physically tired. You are completely hollowed out. We call this being professional. We call it reading the room. We call it being highly adaptable. But an evidence-informed interpretation from organizational psychology suggests a radically different reality. Workplace stress and burnout contribute to roughly $190 billion in annual healthcare costs in the US alone. A massive portion of that exhaustion does not come from the actual labor. We are getting paid to work. We are paying to mask. The cost is deducted directly from your vitality. You are constantly scanning for microscopic shifts in the room's temperature, adjusting your internal thermostat so nobody else feels uncomfortable. This happens most intensely in what Proxemics experts call the personal space zone, that invisible bubble of 1.5 to 4 feet where most workplace interactions occur. Inside that zone, your brain is working overtime. You are calculating eye contact, mirroring hand gestures, and suppressing your actual reactions. It's brilliant. Until it destroys you. And it does not stop when you clock out. As an observed pattern, the algorithms we scroll through act as silent enforcers of this exact same performance. Young Americans spend an average of over $1,000 a year just to purchase products and lifestyles that mirror their digital circles. Terrified of the social death we lightly refer to as FOMO. You are essentially paying a heavy financial tax just to prove you still belong. You adopt the trending vocabulary. You curate the right aesthetic. You perform the exact version of existence the screen demands, terrified that if you step out of the established rhythm, you will be left behind. This constant, low-grade panic creates a profound emotional numbness. You become a spectator in your own life, watching a highly curated avatar interact with the world while the actual you sits silently in the dark. If you look at standard self-help advice, the diagnosis for this behavior is usually pretty brutal. They call you a chronic people pleaser. They tell you to stop being fake. They tell you to just be yourself, as if shedding a lifelong identity is as simple as taking off a heavy winter coat. What I keep noticing is how deeply unfair that framing is. You are not being manipulative. You are deploying evolutionary armor. Research in neurology points to something called mirror neurons in the human brain. These neurons fire both when we act and when we observe others acting. The National Institutes of Health links these mirror neurons to the evolution of social cognition. For our ancestors, blending into the tribe was not about being polite. It was about avoiding death by isolation. In a landmark 1999 study, researchers Chartrand and Barg proved that humans naturally mimic posture, mannerisms, and facial expressions to increase social glue. They called it the chameleon effect. But if you really think about it, why do we only do this around certain people? For many of us, this exhaustion did not start in a corporate boardroom. It started in childhood. It is an evidence-informed interpretation that this behavior is often rooted in the Fawn response. If you grew up in a volatile, unpredictable, or highly strict environment, you learned that the safest way to survive was to pacify the threat. You became whatever the room needed you to be to keep the peace. You did not choose this, but you are the one who has to carry it. The pattern was built by circumstances. It is maintained by habit. And the habit is incredibly difficult to break because, on the surface, it works. People like the chameleon. They praise the chameleon. They promote the chameleon. You get rewarded for your adaptability. But the psychological toll of constantly reflecting everyone else's expectations is devastating. You spend your entire day managing the emotional states of coworkers, friends, family, and even strangers on the internet. You become a master at anticipating what people want to hear before they even finish their sentence. It is we all want to be liked, right? But there is a massive difference between being polite and completely erasing yourself from the equation. When you spend decades acting as a mirror for other people, you eventually forget what you look like when no one is standing in front of you. The tragedy of the chameleon effect is not just the burnout. It is the profound, aching loneliness that accompanies it. You can be surrounded by a dozen people who claim to love you, who invite you to every event, and you can still feel entirely invisible. Because you know, deep down, they are not interacting with you. They are interacting with a carefully constructed projection. Actually, wait. Look at your closest relationships right now. How many of those people know what you actually think when you disagree with them? How many of them have seen you angry or disappointed or entirely unpolished? If the answer is none of them, then you are trapped in the authenticity paradox. You are using this exact survival tool, this flawless mirroring, to avoid the primal danger of social isolation. You are terrified that if you drop the mask, you will be abandoned. But the very armor you are using to avoid isolation is exactly what is keeping you profoundly lonely. They don't love you. They love the mirror. You feel empty because society is connecting with your mask, while the real you is suffocating underneath it. You become everyone else, and you disappear. This is the part where most advice tells you to just start speaking your truth. But understanding and doing are two very different speeds. The environment that forced you to build this armor is not here anymore. You are. The mechanism protected you then, but it has not checked whether the threat is still here now. Dropping the mask is not a sudden, cinematic event. It is a slow, terrifying process of subtraction. It means intentionally pausing for 3 seconds before you agree with an opinion you hate. It means letting an uncomfortable silence hang in the air without rushing to fill it with a joke. It means allowing someone to be mildly disappointed in you and realizing that you did not die. When you stop mirroring, something painful but necessary happens. You filter out the people who only like the reflection. You lose the connections that were built entirely on your compliance. But you make room for the rare, quiet relationships where you do not have to perform to be allowed to stay. If something here landed and your first instinct is to move on quickly, stay with it 10 seconds longer than you want to. What are you protecting that you have never looked at directly? If the mechanism stopped tomorrow, who would you be in the first 10 minutes?